So I posted one video a little while back about two of these reels up here, which was the Sustain and the Twin Power, and going over complete reviews of them. And I had a few people that went on and said that they would like to have these two reels do a comparison about them because they were interested in both and they were curious about what my opinions were on both. So instead of just doing these two specific reels, I decided why not take the four higher end Shimanos I have, which really are their four middle to high end reels they have. They've got a few higher than this and some a lot lower than this. And I'm gonna go over everything about each one of these reels, what's similar on them, the differences between them, and my thoughts on all these reels, and how I rank them from best to worst out of these four. The results actually may surprise a few people watching this video. So anyways, let's hop into the similarities between these reels. First off, I need to mention all of these reels are all C3000 reels. I really wanted to make sure I had all of them in C3000. That way I can do a really good comparison because they're all the same size, so we can look at everything similarly based on the sizes of them. First off, I want to say all of these reels can hold 200 yards, a 10-pound Power Pro braid. And that's exactly what I have on them. These three reels right here, my Stradic, Vanford, and Twin Power, all have Power Pro on them. This has Suffix 832 just because I started really liking that high-vis braid. Eventually, all of my reels, when they run out, or like when the Power Pro goes out, they're all gonna go to Suffix 832, 10-pound braid. The Twin Power may go to 15-pound because it's a little bit more of a saltwater reel. So I may put 15-pound on that one just for one higher braided or higher poundage line reel. So they all fit 200 yards of 10-pound Power Pro braid. Also, another thing to mention is they all have 20 pounds of drag. So that's good to know. 20 pounds is more than enough when you're freshwater fishing. Saltwater, inshore fishing, 20 pounds is gonna do just fine. You're not gonna have any issues with it. Some people may think, oh, you know, I need the most drag I can. This reel has 24 pounds. This reel has 30 pounds. I've investigated a little bit on other brand reels, and yeah, some of them do have a little bit more drag. Some of them also have a little less drag. So I'd say the poundage for the drag on these are pretty standard, pretty, I would say middle to high end for the actual drag on these reels. So the next few things are the different type of technologies that Shimano has that they incorporated in all of these reels. First one being the AeroWrap 2 spool system. Next, they all have X-Protect, X-Ship. They have a G-free body. They have cross-carbon drag system. They also have water-resistant drags because of being that cross-carbon drag. All of these reels also have the SARB bearings. They all have Hagani gears. They all have long stroke spools, micro module 2 gearings, one-piece bails, propulsion line management systems, and silent drive. So these reels all basically have all the bells and whistles that Shimano has on the reels. Pretty much anything you get from the Stradic up is going to have all that silent drive, Hagani gears, X-Protect, X-Ship, the Aero wraps, cross-carbon drags. They really try to put all those really good components into the reels above $200. Now under that, I can't speak for that because I don't really own anything under the Stradic. The Stradic's really the lowest I have now. I had a Noski and I decided I just didn't like it. The Stradic was the lowest I wanted to go. And then I started buying these others. So with that being said, let's move on to the differences between these and the different weights, the retrieve, inch, and all that of each reel. One more thing I want to mention before we hop into all the information of the individual reels is that the Stradic FL, the Sustain, Twin Power, they have the Hagani body, while the Vanford actually has a CI4 Plus body. So that's one difference, which makes the weight difference that you're going to notice in the Vanford compared to the others, because this actually has that CI4 body and the CI4 gears in them to make it the lightest reel possible. And I think that kind of goes into effect on why my opinions on the best to worst at the end are what they are. So starting off, we'll go from the cheapest to most expensive, work our way up. Stradic FL. It retails anywhere from $200 to $220, I believe, depending on the size you want. I know that the Shimano had a price increase this year. I still think you can get these for $199.99 for the 2500 size. 3000, I believe, is $209.99. It may be $219.99 now. Next, the Vanford, it is anywhere, I believe they're from 240 to 250. Now they could be 250 to 250 or 60, depending on that price increase. Sustains, I believe, are 309 to 329, and the Twin Powers are 420 to 440 maybe. I believe, I just know that that one was $419.99 when I bought it. Keep that in mind with going over all the information and all the differences between them, because they range from $200 to $420. So first up is the Shimano Stradic C3000 FL. It's a Stradic FL. This reel, I believe the C3000 retails for $209.99. This reel is 7.9 ounces for the C3000. It's 6+1 bearings, and it is 40 inches per crank for the retrieve. Now, there's nothing else other than I already mentioned that's different between this reel and all the rest. So this has all the basics. It's the lowest end reel on the review, and it has everything that I mentioned that all of these other reels have, and these other ones have a few things plus a few more. Next is a Shimano Vanford C3000. This is a 6.3 ounce reel, the lightest out of all 4 reels I have up here. It's got 7+1 bearings, so it's got one more bearing than the Stradic FL has. It's 37 inches per crank for the retrieve, which is 3 inches less per crank than what the Stradic has. So the big difference between the Vanford and the other, which also contributes to the weight reduction compared to the Stradic, Sustain, and Twin Power, is that it is constructed out of a CI4 Plus material. The other reels, the Sustain and the Twin Power, both are made out of CI4 Plus also, but the Vanford has both the body and gearing made out of CI4 Plus, where the others, it's just a thing or two here or there that has a CI4 Plus in it. It's not the entire reel like the Vanford is. So other than that, it's got the MGL rotor, which you also have inside this Sustain FJ. I really like the MGL rotors on all the reels. Any type of Shimano I own now, I try to get the MGLs just because I like that lighter weight, and to me it feels more durable. Next on the list is the Sustain FJ C3000. This one is 7.4 ounces. It's an 8+1 bearing reel, and it's 35 inches per crank retrieve. So this has 35 inches. This Vanford, I believe it was 37, and then the Stradic was 40. So you're going down in the inches for the retrieve as you go from the Stradic to Sustain. To me, that doesn't really matter. This is also a high gear ratio reel, to where the other two are extra fast, or extra, whatever you want to call it, extra fast gear ratio reels. This one's just a high gear ratio. So that's why you're going from that 40 to 37 to 35. If this was an extra fast, it would probably be a 37 or 40. I don't think they make a Sustain FJ in an extra fast. I think they're just high gear ratios. Other than this, like I mentioned, it is constructed with CI4 Plus material. It's got the MGL rotor on it, and it also has a rigid support drag system, which you'll notice both the Twin Power and the Sustain have that rigid support drag system. It's pretty much the drag support inside of the actual spool is beefed up a little bit. I believe they do that in these two reels because these two specific reels are really marketed to be an inshore saltwater reel. That's why they have all the extra bells and whistles on them, so that you can actually use them in it. You don't get salt in the reel, and you don't destroy your reel with the salt. So that rigid support drag system is really meant for when you have harder fighting fish, when it's messing with the drag. You don't have any of that wobble in the actual spool, and it just stays a lot more compact, tight, and it feels really, really solid. Last on the list is the Twin Power FD C3000. This is 7.6 ounces, so just a tiny bit heavier than the Sustain, but it's lighter than the Stradic. And yeah, I mean, it feels really light when you put it on a rod. Not gonna lie, honestly, any of these reels, the one that balances the best on a rod has to be the Twin Power. I don't know what it is. I think it's just that middle-ish range weight on it that really makes the Twin Power balance really well. So it's 7.6 ounces. It's got 9+1 bearings, 37 inches per crank for the retrieve, which is the same as the Vanford, which is that really good middle point, but this is also an extra fast or extra high gear ratio reel. It's also CI4 Plus material made into the reel, and it's got the same rigid support drag system as the Sustain. So really, the Sustain and Twin Power have all the same types of technology built into them, They're just machined a little bit different, and that's really where you get that 2 ounces lighter with the Sustain over the Twin Power, which kind of surprises me because I would think that the Twin Power was going to be lighter. The Sustain just feels like it's a really well-built reel, and it's a real heavy reel because of that, but surprisingly it is lighter than what the Twin Power is. So with that being said, that wraps up all the similarities and differences between these reels. I've gotten a lot of use out of these reels in the past year. I've had the Stradics now for I think a year and a half to 2 years. Vanford I bought this winter. I got a ton of use out of it on the river trout fishing this winter, and I've also used it up on Lake Erie a few times this year, and on the local rivers and stuff, smallmouth fishing around the area. So I've gotten good use out of the Vanford. Sustain, I've got 2 of them actually now, and I use these things all the time on the rivers for my Ned rig rods up on Lake Erie. I've used it a ton this year. I've actually had the Sustains the least out of any of these reels, and I've probably used it more than any of the others. And then the Twin Power, I've used it on the rivers, and I've used it on lakes and stuff, throwing swim baits. I've got it on a medium power spinning rod, so of course I'm going to be throwing swim baits, shaky heads, all that type of stuff on spinning. Whatever is not the real finesse spinning I've been throwing with the Twin Powers. So that's really where I'm at. I've gotten a bunch of use out of it, and I really think I made an opinion on the reels and where I would rank each reel. Before we get into ranking the reels though, let's talk about the experiences I've had with the reels. First, the Stradic. The Stradic FL, like I said, I've had it for a while. This reel is an absolute workhorse reel. It does kind of show that it's a workhorse reel, with the weight though being the heaviest out of all. I think it was 7.8 or 7.9 ounces. With that being said though, I really feel like you could run this thing over and it is going to perform just as well as it did before you got ran over. As you can see, it is that G-free body. This thing probably spins better than any of my other reels that I have out here. I don't know what it is, but it spins really well, and it's a very easy to turn reel. That reel has caught tons of fish. The drag on it, I love it. But with that being said, it is a little bit heavier than all these other reels, and that's kind of why it's kind of went on the back burner for me compared, because at least for freshwater fishing, when you're sitting there throwing finesse baits all day long, you want to save that little bit of weight on it to it's just less fatigue on your arm casting it. But other than the weight, that reel is an amazing reel. Next is the Vanford. This thing being the lightest on the list, it casts real good. It reels very, very smooth, as you can probably tell right there. Very, very silent. They all have silent drive in them, which for some Shimanos I found that works. Some of it, you really don't notice it as much. But yeah, it feels real good. The drag's really smooth on this reel. At first, I absolutely loved this reel. I will say, the last time I was up on Lake Erie, I was having some issues with this reel, with the actual reel and the thread slipping inside the reel, and also the drag started to stick a little bit. So maybe I can go and do a little bit of maintenance on it and get it to where it's not going to have any issues, but I'm not sure. I've got to really look into that, but it is a great reel, good smooth drag most of the time, and really smooth to reel. Next is the Sustain FJ. This reel, it's got super smooth drag. I absolutely love this reel. Honestly, I throw this 90% or 95% of the time I'm throwing a spinning reel. So this thing's super smooth drag, super quiet, super smooth to reel, easy to start up. And overall, it feels like it's one of those workhorse reels like the Stradic FL, except this one is 3 ounces? No, it's 4 to 5 ounces lighter. So it's, to me, it reminds me a lot of the Stradic FL, just a little bit different milling or machining on it. It's just one of those reels that you feel like you could run over and it's still going to reel fine and be fine, and it won't damage it at all. So that reel, I really like it. Next is my Twin Power FD. This reel came from the Japanese domestic market. If you feel all these reels with spinning them, this is by far the smoothest feeling reel on here, but it also shows in that price tag of, I believe it's $420 on the US market. So with that being said, that's a big thing to consider. It is the absolute smoothest one I've got here, drag wise and the actual reeling wise, but that's also because, as you noticed probably when I was going over it, they go up from 6+1, 7+1, 8+1, and 9-to-1, 9+1 bearings in them. So you got all the extra bearings compared to the other ones. So then that should be the smoothest reel because of having the extra bearing in them. So really, that shouldn't be a surprise at all that that's the smoothest reel that I've got, and probably the farthest casting too. One of the, either the Sustain or the Twin Power is the farthest casting reel I own. And like I mentioned when I was going through with the different reels, I'm surprised that the Twin Power really wasn't the lightest reel on the list other than the Vanford. I thought it was going to be lighter than the Sustain, honestly, before I started looking up information on it. If you just feel these two reels, I mean, I think that the Twin Power feels lighter than what the Sustain does. So that's one thing to consider. It feels really light, which can be a good or bad thing. When I first opened it up and I felt it, it felt extremely light, and I was worried that it was going to break, but it's got that rigid drag support and everything in it to where I've never had an issue. I've caught some decent sized fish with it, both smallmouth and saugeye in the river and Lake Erie, and it's done great. I love that reel. It's one of my favorite reels that I've had so far. So anyways, that's kind of my personal experiences with these reels and kind of my thoughts on these reels personally outside of the actual Shimano specs. So now that that's said, let's hop in to actually ranking these reels. Now, this is already fairly close to what I would rank these reels at if I had to rank them myself from best to worst. The tough one is the Sustain and the Twin Power. Both of them are really amazing reels. I love both of them. But as you probably saw, for the price point, the Twin Power is $420 US market. The Sustain FJ is $320 US market. So it's a $100 difference between the Twin Power and Sustain. And that is the only thing that's going to make me say that the Sustain has to be number one. So that price difference it's not there. The Sustain is a really good reel. The Twin Power is an amazing reel, but I don't think because that price difference that the Twin Power is worth it. Especially because the Sustain is 2 ounces lighter than what the Twin Power is, and it's really got all the same internals as what the Twin Power is. With that being said, the number 2 on the list, of course, has to be that Twin Power because of being such a close competitor with the Sustain. I wish the Twin Power price was lower US market. If you buy Japanese domestic market, the Twin Power, I got it for, I think, $280. So in that case, with the Sustain not being available US or JDM right now, and it's still the full $320 US market, and the Twin Power being less than it, in that case, I would swap them around if you're talking Japanese domestic market prices. But talking US markets, because we're over here in the US, the Sustain is first because of that price difference. Twin Power, though, amazing reel. I would highly recommend it. These are all personal preference and depends on where you buy it. If you're buying US market, get Sustain. If you're buying Japanese market, get the Twin Power FD. After this, which is kind of probably the surprising part about it, personally, there's no question about what's going to be the third place reel to me. It is the Stradic FL. And that is solely because I've had it longer than the Vanford. I've had 0 issues out of the Stradic FL, and I started to have that slipping issue with the Vanford this last few times I've went out. So that's really what makes my mind up putting the Stradic FL in front of the Vanford. Now, if I didn't have those issues with the Vanford, then I probably would have put the Vanford in front because it is a lighter reel, and pretty much has the same internals, except it's all MGLs, or not MGL, it's all CI4, instead of being the Hagani, like full Hagani, like the Stradic is. So that MGL or CI4, sorry, I keep on mixing them up, that CI4 plus material really takes the weight off, and it is the lightest reel out here. But to me, I would rather have a very well constructed reel that's going to have 0 issues and balances really well on a rod than to have a very, very, very light reel that's not going to balance quite as well, and that it's also going to have maybe a few issues here or there. So the Sustain, the Twin Power, they all balance almost perfectly on any rod I throw them on. The Stradic balances well on most rods, but the Stradic, you're going to be wanting to probably get a little bit of a tip-heavy rod to put it on, because with that, it's a heavier reel. It's going to balance real well with a heavy tip, heavy section right there at the butt of the rod or handle of the rod. It's going to balance. The Vanford, you almost have to have something like an extremely light reel or rod for it to balance really well. I had it on a Dobbins Cadence 712 SF. It balanced really good. It felt really good. But then I just took it off because I put a Sustain on that and replaced it with it. So now my Vanford, I don't even think it really goes in my boat anytime I am out fishing anymore. It sits on a rod in my room, and it's going to be used probably for a run and gun rod for the river, or even maybe just a saltwater rod, because I know that people really like Vanfords for saltwater sometimes. So, I mean, I'll use them for saltwater, use something like that instead of sometimes using my Twin Power Sustain and risk damaging them, even though they have all the gears and all the technology in it so they don't get damaged. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. You're not going to be disappointed with any of these reels. I use the absolute crap out of my gear too. I fish 3 to 4 times a week at least, sometimes 4 to 5 times a week. Most people just fish on the weekend, and I use my gear a lot, especially when I'm fishing the river. These spinning reels are the only things I bring with me on the river. Hopefully this helped kind of decide what reel maybe you want to pick up based on this review. And that, yeah, I mean, hopefully it helped you with that, and hopefully you have a little bit of a better understanding on why I think they should be ranked the way they are right here. So thank you guys for watching. If you guys need any other information on these reels, let me know, and I can do individual comparisons if you want, but I think this is a pretty comprehensive comparison of all the reels, pros and cons of each, and what I would think about each. So anyways, thank you for watching. We will see you in the next episode.